Thank you so much, Claudio, for inviting me. It's a really great pleasure because I know you guys are doing some amazing work at the Politecnico in terms of design thinking. I hope you can see the slides.
Yeah. Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Oh, good. Thank you. So let me start with two observations. The first one is, what does Sherlock Holmes and Peter Thiel, who is the founder of PayPal, have in common? And with Peter Thiel, I think most of the innovators and entrepreneurs that we have around the world. One thing that I found have in common is the way they think about the world, about observing the world, and in the end of the day, it's from what we see, it's abductive thinking. And one point that Stefano said before that I would like to highlight is the fact that abduction is indeed about uncertainty, as we will see very shortly. The other observation I would like to make before I start is the reality of innovation is that often good ideas get killed too early in the organization. And by that I mean that the C-level, the CEO, the CMO, those kind of people don't get to see all the innovation that really happens in the front line in the organization, because there is a filter. People are geared towards presenting only things that are certain, only answers that are likely to be accepted, rather than portraying a variety of hypotheses and possibilities about the future. And the other observation about innovation is that we know that too many ideas that get to the marketplace in the end fail. We all remember the case of the Segway. It's cool. Steve Jobs was excited. Steve Jobs allocated a lot of cash to develop the Segway as well. They thought that the market was big, but in the end, you see the Segway only with tourists around cities or at the airport. The Segway didn't really take over the world as they expected. So what is behind? What can be an explanation of those failure and those filtering problem? And what is an explanation of course, on the other side of some of the successes that we have? The explanation can be drilled down to abductive thinking in some respect. And here I will summarize some of the research that I've done in the last few years with several colleagues. We have been looking at innovation and design with a different kind of people, from students to managers, but also with C-level executives. And more recently, I started doing some work with board members, because in the end, as Stefano explained before, it's a lot about culture of innovation and experimentation, and the culture is often set by the board. And in terms of the type of research that we do, we go from interviews to case study, but also experiments to really highlight some of the casual explanations of what's going on. So let me refresh what are different modes of thinking about the world. The first one is deduction, and this is the most common way of thinking in the business world. We have a rule, and we have an observation, a case, and then we make a prediction that we think is true according to the theory, or better, a prediction that is going to be true because there is a theory underpinning that the prediction. The other example is induction, and induction instead starts from a case, starts from an observation. I see something today, I see something tomorrow, I see something the day after. They all are similar, and therefore I'm going to make an inference about a rule. The other mode of thinking is, as Stefano introduced before, abductive thinking. And one way to think about it is abduction is the most parsimonious explanation, hypothesis, to create something new or to explain something that we didn't expect to see. And as Stefano explained before, and I like that he did that, we're talking about the bets. We are not sure about the abductive hypothesis. And that's the beauty of it. And that's the beauty of it because that is going to spark innovation, innovative ideas, but it's also going to help us when we make decisions. So let's have a look at a couple of examples of how they work in practice. If you think about the deduction, we have a rule. For example, we know that companies that don't innovate will disappear from the market. So we observe that a company that we are very close to, or we have been admiring for a long time, has stopped innovation, and therefore we're pretty sure that we can conclude that the company will soon shut down. The induction instead starts with an observation. The observation and a series of observation indeed. And in this case, we observe, for example, that there is a retailer that didn't embrace an e-commerce strategy and is underperforming in comparison to competitors. We observe that there is another retailer that didn't embrace e-commerce and is not performing that well. And again, more retailers behaving the same way. So from there, we can infer that there is a rule. We create the rule, and the rule is retailers without an e-commerce strategy will underperform. We encounter a new case, retailer W. He doesn't have an e-commerce strategy, and therefore we are pretty sure that he's going to underperform the market. Those are the typical way that business school students or managers are trained. And the reason is we are giving them the tools for industry analysis or resource and capability analysis that allow them to come up with one single answer, and that answer is going to be the truth. For those who are familiar with, for example, a Porter 5 forces analysis of the industry and competitors, what we really want at the end of that analysis is always having a label, one correct answer, which is the industry is going to be attractive or the industry is not going to be attractive. And therefore, if the industry is attractive, let's go and enter the market. If the industry is not attractive, let's not enter the market. But this is not the kind of thinking that innovative companies follow, because they would break those rules of the analysis, so the industry analysis of the single answer and the certainty from the single answer, and instead think about what are the possibilities out there. When we think about abduction, there are two types of abduction that we found from research, and they always start from a leap, breaking with the assumption that we have about the world. The first type of abduction is what we call explanatory abduction. And this is an example from an Australian bank, a really large bank that I'm very close to. The way that they, at some point in time, some of the executives, let me actually start with this. The default way to think about banking operation is to think about innovation in the retail space. That's what's visible. That's what is most visible to analysts, but also to customer in general. And instead, this bank, what they did, they say, okay, let's start with this. Let's forget about innovation in retail. Let's try to do something else. And what they did was they observed that their client, the institutional clients and their commercial clients, they were really looking for solutions for wicked problems. And we know that to solve a wicked problem, we can use design thinking. And therefore, they started the process of questioning, what if we use design thinking to use in order to solve our commercial clients' problem? What kind of inputs should we use in the design thinking process? What kind of capabilities do we have as a bank that we can use in order to help our institutional clients? And the answer that at some point emerged, one of the answers was, as a bank, we do have a lot of transaction data from our customers. We know where the customer is spending their money, how often, whether they are in debts. We pretty much know everything about the customer, even traveling. Are they spending the money in their city, or are they spending the money somewhere else? And the other answer that emerged during this process was that the bank was extraordinary in terms of data mining capabilities. When you combine those two, you have data that consulting companies, for example, don't have, because they're not banks and they don't have access to the transaction of their customers. And you're really good at data mining. You put those two together and you come out with a strategic option, an opportunity for the bank, which is offering consulting services to their institutional clients that are based on design thinking to help, and mining capabilities to help interpreting transaction data. And this is a brand new offering for the bank. It's fundamentally a consulting service that the bank is offering to their clients. It's a consulting services from a bank that has transformed the internal consulting arm of the bank from a cost center, they were solving problem for the bank, to a revenue generating center. They're solving problem for someone else and bringing money back in. To link back to Sherlock Holmes, this is often the kind of reasoning that a detective or a doctor does. They know the final outcome. They have to solve a problem. They know, they observe a murder. They observe some aspect of a patient, and they need to work out what is the rule. They need to work out what is the reason of that. And this is, in a way, the simplest form of abduction. The second form of abduction is called innovative abduction. And let me introduce you to this one with an example from IBM of many years ago, which is partly related to the bank, also a little bit different because he introduced a new layer of complexity and innovation. At some point, Gershner, that was CEO in the 90s, said, our bet was this: over the next decade, customers would increasingly value companies that could provide solutions that integrated technology from various suppliers, and more importantly, integrated technology into the process of the enterprise. There are a couple of things that immediately stand out. The first one is he's talking about a bet. He's not talking about we have done all this market research and we know that the market is this big and therefore we have to go there. It starts with an hypothesis, and there is a level of uncertainty in there, which is, it's critical in an abductive argument. And again, then it starts with the customers. What do the customer want? What does he observe from the customer that is an anomaly in a way? And this is when IBM goes from selling computers to becoming a consulting company. So let's see how this works. In the case of innovative abduction, we have an observation. We can have an observation that customers are frustrated with integrating offering from many different suppliers. So we know that the desired outcome is providing that kind of solution. The thing that we are reinventing here is the hypothesis, the rule. It's the business model that is completely different from anything the company was done before, but also different from anything that other competitors are doing. And this is very much when, for those who are familiar with Zero to None from Peter Thiel, he talks about the secret sauce. Every company has to have a secret sauce. So they have to look at the world in a different way to come up with opportunities that no one else has done before. And he brings the examples of Elon Musk in his book, where he say everyone knows that climate change is happening. They know that we need to do something about it, and they know that people want to contribute to that, and the market is big. So a lot of companies at the beginning ended up doing solar panel or doing a Prius and other Honda cheaper version of a cheaper car. But he realized at that point that it was fashion. People wanted to look cool in whatever they were using. They wanted to make a statement. And that's when Tesla became a really good looking but also expensive car. He created fundamentally a brand new market with a brand new business model of taking the car straight to the consumer, bypassing the entire value chain and distribution network of other car sellers. And that's when you can see that as an innovative abduction. You're not reinventing just what you do, but you're reinventing also the entire ways of doing things because of some secret explanation, secret source, innovative abductive hypothesis that you have done. Let me go through the other part of the title of the conversation for today, which is abduction has two applications. One is in generating option, and the other one is in decision making. Option generation is a fundamental way that we think about and we see the world, and has been often understudied in psychology research, cognition science, and really understudied in management and strategy research. And only recently, in the last, I would say, 5 years, we have seen some studies, and they all point towards certain aspects of option generation that are common to both humans but also animals, and humans from playing sports to going down for a walk and looking at the world around us to make a strategic decision. At the most basic level, option generation is based on how our brain sees the world. And by that I mean, it depends on the baggage of experience and knowledge that we have and the environment that we are at a certain point in time. If you think about you observing an input, A prime, the default way that the brain operates at that point is connecting that input with an analogy that is in your brain because of your experiences or because of your expertise. You're a designer, you see the world with a certain lens. You're a business person, a strategy person, a finance person, you see the world in a different way. And what happens after that, and is the part that is interesting for me, is that the brain starts to make different type of predictions of what the brain is going to see next. A, B, C, D. B, C, and D. And those predictions have uncertainty that is connected to them. We expect that something will happen, B will happen, but maybe C will happen. We don't know, and we don't want to kill that straight away. Example, think about a hairdryer. You see the hairdryer A prime, and in your mind you have, yeah, I see this is pretty similar to something else I've seen that before. And then, depending on the context in which you are you at the hairdresser? Are you in your bathroom? Are you in an appliance store? Are you at the barber? Your brain starts immediately to think about, what am I going to see next? I'm going to see this bottle, I'm going to see a mirror, I'm going to see scissors, and has some probability distribution according to the experience and the expertise, but also the environment that they're in. It's more likely that you see the mirror if you are at the barber rather than if you are in an appliance store. If you're in the appliance store, you might see something else. So it's really important at this point to, I think, highlight the fact that this variety of prediction is what make abduction really powerful, and the ability to keep in your mind and the ability to have an organizational culture that say, yeah, we are coming up with an idea, and that idea is sparked multiple ideas, and we keep all those at the same time, and we think about that for a long time before transforming that into a project. It's fundamental to become a more innovative culture. What we had prepared at some point was a template, or what I call sometimes a laundry list of a way to think about abduction, to spark questions and ideas. In the explanatory abduction, we tend to look for anomalies in the environment or in the market with consumers, in the supply chain, in the technology. And from there, we ask ourselves questions on how can we make sense of this? What are multiple explanations of that particular instance that we have observed? In the case of innovative abduction, we go a step further, and instead we really start to think more strongly and hardly about revising or transforming something completely, which can be business models, products, or creating completely new market segments. The other part of abduction is decision making. Abduction can help not just in when you generate options about possible futures, but also when you make decisions. And this is based on some experiments that we've run, both with students and some colleague of mine with executive over time. And this is a very preliminary evidence that gives an indication of how abduction can be used in the context of making a decision. What we did was we identified 7 projects from a crowdsourcing platform. Some of those projects were successful. Some of those projects were not successful because they didn't raise enough money. And so we knew what was the outcome of that, project already. And we recreated this brief that illustrate the product that was going for funding, and we asked a group of students and executives to make a decisions. Would you allocate money to this project? And in the mix, we have, as I say, successful and unsuccessful projects. Importantly, we created 2 groups of people. On one side, we had people that were manipulated into thinking in abductive terms about the problem, and people that were instead thinking in more deductive or inductive terms. The way that we did that in that particular instance was, for the deductive part, we asked them to make a decision straight away, and so to have this yes or no go answer and a degree of certainty on that. For the abductive reasoning part, we asked the person, look, this is a potential project. We are asking for money. However, before you make a decision, please spend some time thinking about possible extensions of that product. Extension could be anything like new business models, new kind of customers, new kind of way that the product could work. The expectation was, as you can imagine now, is that if you're down the deductive path, you should reject project more often because you're searching for that specific, unique answer. If you're in an abductive reasoning frame, you're thinking about the future scenario and possibility, and so you should tend to accept projects more often, which means good and bad projects at the same time. What happened was really interesting. the number of projects accepted didn't change substantially between the two groups, between the deductive thinking group and the abductive thinking group. And that makes you think that the default way that the brain is trained, which is using deduction, is actually quite strong and is quite difficult to change. And this is something that we are investigating more now to see what are different ways of inducing abductive reasoning in order to increase the number of projects that you can accept and the number of good projects. The other part that was really interesting and surprising for us was that the abductive reasoning group was doing much better in accepting the good projects and rejecting the bad projects. So the group that was in the abductive condition was overall making better decisions than the other group. In reality, the other group could have picked the project randomly and it would have still done fine because they were not placed in a condition in which they were actually able to realize what is the future of a project rather than just the project per itself. They were not able to create possibilities about the future. So let me conclude with some tips that summarize this discussion so far. The first one is, we saw in the option generation part, the default way that the brain operates when it doesn't have a goal, a predetermined goal, is to make prediction about the future. And those predictions are based on what you know, your life experiences, and the context or the environment that you're in. So it's important that you let your managers and your people to build and expand the repertoire of dots, their experience and their expertise really outside the domain in order for them to then create bets about the future. What we found also is that, and this is even more preliminary, is that by using themes, visions about the world, you help your people more to search for dots in particular part of the world, of the technology developments, customer segment, etc. The other tips that we would recommend is that be comfortable with uncertainty. When abductive reasoning happens, people are what is the business model, what is the cause of something. And we need, we need to encourage people to come up with ideas that are not certain about. Very much related to this, something that I've learned from a colleague is, and a really senior practitioner, don't transform ideas into project too early, because as soon as you call an idea a project, what happens is project management and project innovation management comes into action, and the whole, at the bottom, the whole goal of a process is to reduce uncertainty, and in that way you reduce innovation and creativity as part of the journey. So always think, when is the right time to transform these ideas and these abductive hypotheses into a project? The other two more strategic, I would say, tips are around the fact of really question the filtering system inside the organization. Do you have processes in place so that ideas don't bubble up to the decision making at the top because they're killed on the basis of deductive thinking? And the last one, very much connected with Stefano talk about experimentation. Especially nowadays with what happened to COVID, we see that the companies that are not too obsessed with the typical 6 or most of the time 12 months strategy planning process, but they are more in tune with experimentation, with uncertainty. They're more with those are the ones that are able to really thrive in this environment. More than happy to answer any questions you might have.